Okay. Any?
Yes, sir.
What's the first?
I stand up.
That's okay. You're fine. Tell me your name before you ask a question, if you would, please.
My name's Russ from down Littleton.
Okay.
I'm enthused by what you had to say about education and serving on the education committee. And what is it going to take in your mind to break that cycle of that mindset that in order to improve education, we just have to be a teacher? Once again, I'm one of those people who used to be a teacher.
Right.
And at some point, it's not a matter of more money. It is sometimes an instance of a bad teacher, but more often than not, it's the teacher being stuck in a system where it is the inmates running the asylum. You know, you get kids sitting there in class like, I didn't do it, you can't make me. What are you going to do? You know, you can legislate teachers, but you can't legislate, unfortunately, lousy parents, which, unfortunately, that's the issue a great percentage of the time. Kids don't care because their parents don't. And, you know, what is the answer to that, or is there one?
Well, there's no simple answer, first of all. You really have two basic challenges. And in a lot of these large urban areas, the inner city schools are, as I said, really failing students in really profound and obvious ways. And the solution to that is, frankly, what Michael Bennett has proposed, and a lot of inner city school districts doing. They're just starting over. They're shutting schools down. They're reopening. They're restaffing. I mean, they're doing bold structural reform. So you have one set of issues that demands one set of solutions. But the other side, you have a lot of these suburban school districts with parents and communities that love their schools. But in so many instances, they're mired in mediocrity. For example, if you run on school board on the platform of requiring rigorous math and science requirements, I can guarantee you in a lot of these communities, they're going to say, hey, you're ruffling the feathers, you're making life complex, you're going to mess with soccer practice, you know, all those types of considerations. Ultimately, though, what's interesting is that the public agrees with us. I mean, they see the need for education reform in almost national security dimensions. I mean, if you step back and think about it, in 50-year increments, if we don't improve our education system, if we don't generate and produce the next generation of doctors and lawyers and scientists who are going to come up with the next gadgets, build the next economy, it is inevitable that the quality of life for our kids and their kids will be less than ours is today. And so it really takes on that dimension. And so I think what we have to do in the broad sense is to say, look, we're going to have to do some uncomfortable things. For example, this is one that President Obama, to his credit, talked about. We're going to have to extend the school day. We're going to have to tell kids who aren't proficient in reading at third grade, for example, when the state says the kids should know how to read, you're going to stay in summer school. If you're not proficient, we're going to keep you. We're going to challenge you. We're going to make sure that you get to the point that you need to be. Ultimately, and I've got two young kids, and I know many of you in this room have kids as well. They are amazing. You challenge them, and they rise with it. They rise with the expectations. So I think that's what the government has to do. The first principle, we've got to set a clear goal. It's got to be a lofty goal, rigorous standards, and push kids in that direction. But no, when we do it, you have to know that sort of the establishment is going to push back. Again, as I said, the good news is I think the public gets it. They know that big and bold reform in the education front is necessary. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How do you determine the merit? Because I know that's a big discussion with teachers. There's different teachers too, with like in consideration of teachers who teach like advanced courses versus regular courses, things like that.
Yeah, the question was how do you pay teachers based on merit? And there are a lot. You probably know a lot of the various models. I mean, first of all, we have to incentivize parents to go, or good teachers to go to troubled schools where there are needy students. In other words, as you know, you just don't want all the good teachers to flock to the schools where the easiest demographic is. So we need to reward teachers who will go there. We need to reward them based on student growth. And Colorado is actually at the forefront on this issue. Instead of just saying, okay, where is a student today, we're using these growth models, and it's complicated statistics, but essentially through assessments you say you can judge to see where a student is growing over time. And I think ultimately what you have to do is you have to be willing to compensate them based on the performance of their students. Now this is controversial in some quarters, and it shouldn't be the sum total of your compensation package, but I think teachers should be incentivized, encouraged to be creative and look for ways to force that, to push that student growth. And it's worked. I mean, there are a number of examples where it's been done successfully. There are some who are, the teachers unions in particular, are against it, but to me, it's something that we just have to be willing to try, again, towards the end of incentivizing more and better performance.
Sorry, one follow-up.
Yeah.
Was it like an individual percentage, like let's say a student that like absolutely of a percentage reading level. It's based on each individual student's growth for that individual.
Well, the answers could be lots of different things. Here's one model. What if rather than giving every school, X amount of dollars per student and just sort of throwing it into whatever it is we throw it into that black box and watch whatever happens happen? What if we gave that increase, you give some share of it to pay the utility bills and to deal with all the fixed costs, but the rest of it you give to the principal and you say, figure out a way in your own unique circumstance to incentivize and reward teachers. And give them the flexibility to know when they find if Amy's got a tough class, and yeah, they're not to the point where they're all in AP class, but there's been real growth. Really incentivize principals at the school level to identify teachers who are doing a good job, reward them in a more flexible means. I mean, those are the types of things that we have to experiment with and touch and trust teachers, administrators to sort of give them an end game and say, go find a way to get there. That's one model that's been tried. And there are a lot of other ones where you essentially, if you have a certain number of students to a level of proficiency, in a more formulaic way, then you get a pay bump. There are a lot of ways to do it. I think the broader goal of performance pay, though, is worth exploring. Any other questions? Yes. How are you?
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, Josh. Brad Jones.
I know.
This hospital provider fee, it's a tax. It's a hospital bed tax, but it seems to me that if enough Democrats say over and over again that it's a fee, not a tax, trust us, we understand that the nuance, that it'll somehow become reality. I mean, there's a Supreme Court that would probably uphold it. What do we do?
Yeah, good question. So for those of you not tracking what's happening at the Capitol day today, first of all, congratulations, you have a life. Sorry, Brad, and that's to me.
I have no life, it's true.
There's a proposal that would, in Colorado, if you want to raise taxes, you have to go ask the people of the state of Colorado to approve it. Tabor, I think it's pretty cool, and a lot of other states wish they had it. It would actually keep them out of a lot of trouble that they're in. But you will see, and it's unimaginable. Literally every day, somebody else has a different scheme to generate more money in ways that are never taxes, but in fact they are taxes. The case that Brad's talking about is essentially there's a group of the hospitals have come forward with a piece of legislation that would say every day you're checked into a hospital, so let's say you're having a child, you have a C-section, you're in the hospital for 3 days. You will pay a fee, and it's to be determined, but between $1,000 and $3,000 per day. And that fee, that's big bucks. Let's say it's $3 grand. So you're up to $9 grand over 3 days. The goal of it is the federal government matches. That money would go into the Medicaid program, and the federal government will match every dollar that the state puts in with its own dollars. So for that 3-day visit, if it's $9 grand, the federal government will throw in another $9 grand. And so what the proponents of the bill are saying, hey, it's free money. By imposing this fee on ourselves, we're going to get this drawdown from Washington, which together is about $1.2 billion. So let's analyze this. First of all, is it free money? Let's look at both sides of the transaction. First of all, costs are never free. Anybody in business in here? If there's a cost imposed on you, what do?
Pass it on.
You pass it on. So if there's a $3,000 kicker on the end of your bill every day and you're a hospital, you're going to pass it on. Now, they're going to try and say, well, we won't pass it on. We know that's economic behavior. You're going to pass it on. So that's not free. What that means is hospitals pass it on to insurance companies. Insurance companies pass it on to you and me in the form of higher deductibles. Healthcare becomes more expensive. Maybe you can't afford it. Maybe you get in an accident. Maybe you go to the ER because you couldn't afford it. And it's sort of the death spiral. So it just adds cost into a healthcare system that's already too expensive. On the other side, of course, money from the federal government is free. We are all taxpayers to the federal government, after all. Medicaid is set to go broke in 2017. And so essentially what the state of Colorado is saying, yeah, forget the fact that all this is on Uncle Sam's credit card. And forget the fact that Medicaid is going broke in 2017. Let's all pile on and get as much as we can, $600 million more a year, while the getting's good. To me, it is the height of irresponsible. Now, the bad news is elections have, well, not the bad news. The reality is elections have consequences, and the bad news is that the other team has control of it. And what we've seen this year in the General Assembly, whether it's car taxes, whether it's passing the most restrictive oil and gas regulations in the country at a time we need all the jobs and the energy we can get, repealing spending limits, fees galore. I mean, they can pass these things on a party line vote, and they will, and they'll very likely pass this one on a party line vote as well. That's the bad news. The good news is at some point, I believe in my heart of hearts, and I think that what happens with initiatives to bear this out, Colorado